was told, we will not as a newspaper ever publish anything against vaccines. We won't do it. And I said, but this is a completely new vaccine. I mean, you filled the paper with articles about how different it is to anything else. And isn't that great? Maybe it is great, but we have no idea what's going to happen. And I said to him, what if it's a disaster? What if it doesn't work and injures people? And he just said, that won't happen because vaccines are safe and wonderful.
Wow.
You know.
Well, now we know now that they're not, and I think you may have told your bosses at the time when you found yourself in a bit of turmoil there, that eventually the paper will publish information that agrees with you. Is that correct?
Yes. So I had to go and after I got into this spat on Twitter again with this doctor, and I was suspended and told there would be a disciplinary hearing in London that I had to go to. And, you know, at that point I did think, okay, this could be it.
Just briefly describe the spat you were in.
There's a doctor on Twitter. Allegedly, she's a doctor. Not many other doctors appear to have worked with her very much, but she was very high profile from the outset in promoting everything, all the lockdowns and the masks. When the jabs came along, she was telling teenagers to go and get jabbed without telling their parents. This kind of character. All of the marches that happened in lockdown, she would against lockdowns, she would condemn them and say, you know, these people are dangerous and
super spreader events. That's what we called them.
Super spreader events, all of that. So there are many of these characters, you know, on social media who you see and you get very frustrated about, and generally you ignore them and put your phone down and go for a walk or whatever. As you said, my family have had a really difficult time with Poppy. She became very ill because of what was happening, not being able to see any of her consultants. She couldn't have any of her therapy. You know, normally she has hydrotherapy and she goes horse riding and physiotherapy. Everything like that had stopped. Her seizures had got worse. Not being in school really confused her. I think it was a particularly bad day anyway, and I saw this character complaining that somebody had been rude to her on the tube or something because she had a mask on, you know. And I lost my rag slightly and just said to her, you know, I think you and people like you probably deserve verbal abuse for what you have done to families across this country.
Fair enough.
Only verbal abuse.
Yeah.
You know, I would never have said anything about physically abusing somebody, which some people now accuse me of saying. Anyway, I probably strategically, you know, career-wise, shouldn't have said that.
Oh, you say that in hindsight, Bob.
Yeah. But I do kind of stand by it in the sense that these people with platforms and audiences who relentlessly called for this stuff that was damaging lives and killing people, I mean, I think, would you not expect some repercussions when you then go and sit on a train surrounded by people whose lives you've helped to destroy? Anyway, the usual Twitter pylon happened, you know, where lots of different accounts were sharing this and saying I was disgusting and calling for me to lose my job. And so then the paper suspended me and I had this hearing. And I basically, first of all, tried to defend myself by saying this is not actually to do with my professional work, or I'm not saying these things in my capacity as a Telegraph employee. I'm saying them as a father who's concerned for his child and trying to defend her against people who are calling for things that actively harm her. And you saw my show, and in the show I talk quite intimately about Poppy and what happened to her and what the situation is. The first time I'd ever said that to anyone was in this hearing I had for my job, and it was a stranger. I didn't know the guy. It wasn't someone I'd ever worked with. It was some bloke from corporate who I hadn't met, and I had to sit there and say these things to him to try and contextualize what I was doing. Because really it's the reason for everything I've done, what happened to Poppy. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have done any of that work or taken the stance, really, if that hadn't happened to her when she was born and she'd been brain damaged. Really difficult thing to do, you know, and I think I did break down talking about it, and I got to the end and the guy just said, that's not relevant to any of this. So, you know, at that point you're thinking, I don't want to keep this job.
Yeah,
Thanks, you know?
yeah. I imagine that would have strengthened your resolve.
Yeah, but I then went on to sort of point out all of the articles they've been publishing about how damaging lockdowns were.
Yep.
On a global scale, about how many people were likely to be impoverished and killed by them, and I did say, I think that I have no doubt that eventually, in a year or two, you will be publishing articles about what I'm saying now about the damage it's done to children, about how totally unnecessary it was, about how the people who demanded them deserve some repercussions. That is what you're now sacking me for, and I want you to be aware of that. This guy didn't care. Obviously, this guy was nothing to do with editorial. He doesn't understand about what articles they might be publishing or care. He was totally concerned with revenue and reputation and what it looked like, you know, because there'd been all this pressure from accounts with blue ticks on Twitter calling for me to be fired.
A reputation of a newspaper until COVID was based on its integrity. This guy was essentially saying, we don't care about our integrity, we just care about what blue ticks on Twitter say about us.
Yeah, and I did point out to him as well, every single person who's attacked me and called for me to be fired is a Guardian reader who hates the Telegraph.
Yeah.
What you're doing is caving to people who are never going to give you money anyway.